So the Rise of Skywalker novelization just hit the street in Chicago C2E2 Comic Con, and it is more or less kind of blowing the lid off of how badly managed the sequel trilogy was. And I'm going to talk about that right now. Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing? Matt Jarbo here with $3 Theater. And before we begin, do me a solid and hit that like, beat the crap out of that like you probably want to beat the crap out of J.J. Abrams for how poorly managed the final film in the Skywalker saga was. I mean, look, I liked The Rise of Skywalker for what it was, but there are some glaring flaws, some situations that are very difficult to overlook. There are a couple problems that could have been explained in the movie, but instead we get the novelization, and most likely even going to be further explained or further retconned in the comic that's going to be coming. There is going to be a graphic novel, or at least a comic series that's coming. They did the same thing with The Last Jedi. They had a couple extra things in there. And it goes to show you that what we see in the movies is not what we get in the books. And this has been the case for a long time, right? Like, I remember when I was, I was 12, 1994, True Lies came out, and I love True Lies, but I was so young, my mom didn't want to take me to see it because it was rated R. She thought it might be too violent, but we were going out of town. So I found the novelization at the Safeway, and I'm like, hey, listen, why don't I buy the book? Why don't we read the book while we're on vacation? And if you like it and think it's okay, take me to go see the movie. And she was like, okay, fine, that's a good deal. We both read the book over the week. She loved it. Still refused to take me to go and see the damn movie, but it was basically giving us a blueprint of what to expect. This is very similar to that, but it gives us context to a couple things that are really angering a lot of people, myself included. Now, I have been a longtime defender of The Rise of Skywalker for what it did right, and I've kind of forgiven what it did wrong, but when it came to Palpatine, I really feel they dropped the ball. I was on board with Palpatine coming back. I was 100% on board with him coming back because, yes, I agreed with J.J. Abrams' assessment that throughout the entire, saga, he had been a key player in all of it. The downside, though, has really been that we didn't get a great setup for him in The Last Jedi. And as we've learned from that Rian Johnson clip talking about building up a story and not even worrying about the universe that you're playing in, it goes to show us exactly why things went as wrong as they did with The Last Jedi. And I know that they tried with The Rise of Skywalker to retcon and fix and change a whole bunch of stuff. But the truth of the matter is, they could have seriously added in a couple of these lines of dialogue that really would have fleshed things out. So for one, what we already kind of figured out based upon the opening of the movie on Exegol is that Palpatine was a clone. If he says that he made Snoke and that he controlled Snoke and that he was, the father of Snoke and pulling the strings from behind the scenes and everything else, it's easy to see that, yeah, okay, fine, Palpatine's a clone. That's the whole Dark Empire storyline right there, just nowhere near as good as that EU story. And that's another reason why the High Republic is such an interesting thing going forward, because the High Republic is like the new EU, except it's actually canon, whereas before, it's not canon. Right? George Lucas never cared about the EU being canon, not one bit. He just wanted to make money off of it. As much as we all loved the guy, we have to understand that when it came to business, he wanted the money. And again, I don't really blame him for that one. But Palpatine being a clone, right? That's the thing that should have been talked about. Palpatine coming back out of a 2-hour and 30-minute long movie. You could cut out all the times Finn yelled out, "Rey!" Or all the times he wanted to tell her that he was potentially Force sensitive, but never got up the balls to actually do it. Never mind the fact that they were currently in a pit of quicksand or something along those lines. He never actually, it was so dumb. That was such a dumb storyline. Had no setup, no basis in the previous films. So that was dumb. I really hated Finn's storyline in Rise of Skywalker because it went nowhere. The Gianna storyline was interesting, but it went nowhere. They didn't give us these scenes that really kind of fleshed out the story. And these scenes would have ultimately just kind of been maybe a little bit here, a little bit there, make the movie 3 hours long. We know with Endgame, it's not going to matter. The movie was guaranteed to cross $1 billion regardless. Maybe it would have tested better with audiences, and maybe it would have made more cash. The other thing too at the end of this, and this is what's pissing off Raylos that I find to be interesting, is that the Reylos are upset that Ben doesn't become a Force ghost in the book, right? And that part I'm actually okay with. Like, I did read the section of the novelization that talked about Ben giving his life force to Rey and how Rey felt as if she had finally found the dyad. She had finally found Ben Solo. She could finally get to know Ben Solo. She was finally happy to have that person to share things with. And then he just died, right? And that pissed off all the Reylos. But, in that moment, she was upset because she was, worried that she would never, she finally found something she'd been looking for. Kind of, I guess. Like, I mean, again, in the movies, her not knowing who she was, there was a big part of that was also kind of tied up with her. It doesn't matter where you come. And that was the whole impetus of Rian Johnson's movie, was it didn't matter where you came from. You can build yourself up into practically anything, right? Anyone can be anything realistically. And it's funny too, because even the original Pokemon movie that came out 20 years ago, that was the very same story. And in the new version for Netflix that they just released the other day, it actually kind of changes that particular moral lesson in that story, and it just kind of screws it up. And even here, it kind of screws it up, right? I understand the dyad, I understand why the two of them needed to be together, and I get why they were drawn to each other, right? Obviously, there was that line with The Last Jedi that says the light will rise itself to rise to meet the dark, and it's keeping everything in balance, and that was the whole point. But still, it could have been explained a bit better. It could have been talked about a bit more. There was no real explanation outside of Kylo saying, we're a dyad. And then everyone in the audience is like, what the fuck is a dyad? I have no idea. Hold on. Google that real quick while we're watching a damn movie. The book fleshes out a bunch of stuff from what I've seen in different passages. People have been talking about it, and it really does go to show you that there were things and there were elements probably in the script and in pre-production and maybe stuff that they actually even shot that would have fleshed out this story a lot more. And somehow, some way, some person came in and clipped it. And I don't think that it was J.J. Abrams. I really honestly don't think that it was J.J. I think if anything, it was potentially Iger or it was potentially Kathy. And it's probably more Iger than Kathy because it had so much writing on this, and I'm pretty sure there was just too many cooks in the kitchen. That's how I personally view it. Not to say that there were multiple cuts. There was no George Lucas cut. There's probably not even a There's probably not even a J.J. Abrams cut, really. And there's probably not even a full-on, anyone else's cut. It's just like a collaborative. This is the notes that they provide, and this is what they did, and they came to an agreement across the board. Now, it could be a JJ cut. Fans have been demanding a JJ cut, and I think that's only going to grow with the release of this novelization. Fans are going to dive into it. They're going to get the nuggets of information that are going to really kind of like expand upon certain things, and they're going to go, why wasn't this in the movie? And again, when I talk about the High Republic, what's great about the High Republic is that they are kind of laying the groundwork for what's going to come. And it's stuff that will probably be explained in future films, but it's also going to be laying out these characters, establishing locations, establishing a timeline, and really trying to find a way to make it all work. And I think that was maybe one of the problems, is JJ didn't have enough time. And I say that like this because I feel like he could have had 4 hours if he wanted it. Really. I think we're at a time now where like that doesn't really matter, especially with Endgame coming in at 3 hours and 1 minute and it's pulling in nearly $3 billion. I mean, that doesn't matter. A good movie is a good movie and people will show up regardless. And I think if The Rise of Skywalker would have been as good as The Force Awakens, which also, interestingly enough, pulled from the EU, and that's its own thing, that there would have been a lot more that probably would have been better well received. But it does show you that there is a very big lack of management in Lucasfilm for Star Wars, for the movies right now. And it only just further exemplifies why TV is going to be the future of Star Wars. Why I keep saying, and I think I've been proven right so far, that Disney Plus will save Star Wars. And I really hope that in the next future, whoever takes over the reins next, because it won't be JJ, and it probably won't even be Kathleen Kennedy, all things considered, really does at least start to look at what's been established timeline-wise and plays within those rules and make sure that the audience is there as best as they possibly can be, because the audience is going to need to know that information, right? One of the things that sucked about The Rise of Skywalker was we were getting all these kind of explanations after the fact, right? Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams were kind of offering up ancillary information about what certain things mean, or what they were intended to do, or what they had really wanted to do. And as a result of that, it got to be a little bit confusing, simply because it was like, well, why wasn't this stuff in the movie? You clearly have thought about it. Why isn't it there? Which only again kind of fuels that release the JJ cut thing. So it's in a weird place, man. And this stuff only further pushes that narrative of how badly managed the sequel trilogy was. And as much as a defender of it as I am, not The Last Jedi, but as much of a defender as I am of 7 and 9, I can see that. And I have seen that. This only further solidifies it in my mind, which then only kind of makes me more depressed, because then I'm like, man, damn it. If you just would have like not locked yourself into release dates, or done a 3-year, pushed back The Rise of Skywalker by 1 year to make sure you got it right, which I think would have probably been for the best, then we would be living in a much different world. But unfortunately, with these corporate deadlines and trying to get things out due to synergistic reasons, because that's what Disney's about these days, and they have been for a long time, it does screw the creative process. And then there are shortcomings, or there are shortcuts that get taken, and those shortcuts end up destroying the narrative, which then fuels the criticisms of there being no planning. And that's what I don't get. It's like, was Iger so desperate to try to make back the money that he opted to really kind of screw Star Wars? And I think he does take some credit here. I think he needs to take some credit here. And there's also a reason why I think he stepped down. And I think this might be something to do with it as well. I think the failures of Galaxy's Edge in its first few months, a lot of it was him. The failure of the movies, 2 of them really, that would be Last Jedi and Solo. He said, oh, that's our bad for putting them out too quick. It wasn't. You just didn't plan it out. We know this now. But it does kind of feel like Kathy is probably trying to bring in more people to handle this, like Filoni and Favreau handling The Mandalorian. Filoni doing the Star Wars Star Wars Clone Wars Season 7, and whatever this potential rumored sequel series to Star Wars Rebels, as well as the finale of Star Wars Resistance. There's so much there that's happening on the small screen and in small scale that it's going to do a way to bring in, I think it's going to do a lot to bring in new fans. And that's going to then lead to having a better, more thoughtfully planned series of films. So they're going back to the drawing board, which is great. They realize their problems, which is great. But now we get to kind of see how the nuts and bolts formulated the sequel trilogy and how bad that whole thing turned out. And I hate saying that. I don't ever want to say that. I don't ever want to say anything in Star Wars is bad. I love Star Wars. But yeah, the novelization and them adding things to it like that, it just proves how bad things were. And that is unfortunate. But I leave that to you, your guys' thoughts, your guys' opinions. Let me know down in the comments below. I will talk to you all later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and peace out.